And this is a breaking news edition of Fox News at Night. There are reports coming in that Israel has now begun its highly anticipated retaliatory strikes against Iran. Now, we are tracking these developments, and we are hearing that explosions have been heard over Iran proper, as well as in southern Syria, and explosions heard above Iraq. We do not know if any areas of Iraq were hit. We think there were some explosions in southern Syria, and there are reports of possibility of strikes in southern Iran near the Natanz and the Fordow nuclear facilities.
Hello, you are watching American in Exile. My name is Seraphim Hanish, and I want to talk to you today about Israel striking back at Iran. Last night, Thursday night into Friday morning, on April 18 through 19, 2024, we started getting reports of Israel launching a retaliatory strike against Iran in response to the strike that Iran made over the weekend, just a few days ago. Israel's strike, initially, there were certainly questions in the media about whether or not the United States had been notified in advance of the strike. Later reports said that the United States was notified in advance of this and that it was supposed to be limited. However, Iran has absolutely sworn that any response from Israel is going to be met with far more massive counterstrikes. And so this, as we go, I'm going to set the table, but this is the beginning of setting the table for what I want to talk about. Further, another story yesterday that was making the news was about a large protest that took place at Columbia University in New York City, where there were a bunch of people protesting the Israeli behavior towards people in Gaza. It's being widely considered a genocide, and not without reason, because the stats on this are claiming right now in the neighborhood of 35,000 Palestinian citizens having been killed by Israeli military activity in Gaza. Keep in mind that this 35,000 is not 35,000 Hamas members. It is 35,000 Palestinians living in Gaza, and not everybody in that part of the world is part of Hamas. So this particular narrative is being broadcast by pro-Palestinian folks and by somewhat more neutral broadcasters. I would consider Russia Today to be relatively neutral in this compared to the American point of view. And I say relatively neutral because there is also some interest with the news writers and editors at Russia Today to kind of present what we might call an alternative to U.S. hegemonic thinking. And so they, at the same time, though, I should say that Russia is not in a position where it considers it wise to directly contradict Israel and to be anti-Israel. And there's a history of that with the 1967 war and other things where the Soviet Union took an anti-Israel posture and lost because the Israelis were really good fighters and they won their wars back in those times. The 67 war, all of this, Israel was really, kicking some serious behind in those days, and nobody could beat them. So anyway, these Columbia protesters were chanting "Death to America." This is the second time I believe this has come up in recent times. There was a situation where there were protesters chanting "Death to America" in Dearborn, Michigan. It took several days for their own governor to respond to it, and her response was not adequate. Of course, because she's a Democrat and she's a liberal and she can't really say anything that's going to go off the plantation, of the Democrat plantation, such as it is right now. So we have these situations. It turned out that a lot of these protesters at Columbia University were rather severely detained, physically detained, and removed from the campus. And there was a further story that Google fired a number of its employees for having an anti-Israel position in some public thing that they did. So here we have the situation. And it is complicated because it's complicated by the facts. And the facts are these. Israel was not striking back against an unprovoked action by Iran, because all we have to do is go back a week or two and see that the Iran strike was provoked by Israel's having bombed and killed a number of people in an Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, not even on Israeli territory. So this situation has been seen in the United Nations community as absolutely wrong to do that, to go and blow up somebody else's embassy in another country. So it's like a double jeopardy. It's twice as wrong to do something like that, because if I strike a site in Syria, then I am committing an act of war against Syria. But to strike against an embassy of some other country in Syria is twice the trouble, because one, I'm over another country's territory and airspace doing it, and I'm striking at what is often diplomatically considered sovereign territory of the country in question, in this case Iran. So Iran would be very well within their rights to consider this an absolute and outright attack on Iranian soil, even though that Iranian soil happens to be in Syria. Okay, so this is one way of looking at it. And I'm sure the Iranians were very willing to look at it that way. But then what about before that? Well, Israel and Iran have been throwing invective at each other for a long, long time. And we would have to go back, but we might go back and find another Israeli-led or sponsored attack on Iranian assets, and so on and so on and so on. Well, the question here becomes who is right. And that question seems to have been decided in the American media particularly. I like to pick on Fox News, and so I'm continuing to pick on Fox News for its rather absolutist point of view that Israel is, by definition, always right because it is Israel. And because, and they don't go any further with that than to discuss that it's Israel. They leave the reasoning for why Israel would automatically be right either to the purely political sphere, or they don't say the real reason why at all. Now, the political reason that is often expressed is that Israel is the Middle East's only functioning democracy, or, of course, democracy is thrown around quite loosely, but it probably would be appropriate to say that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that seems to be functioning as a Western state, like a European state or like the United States in terms of its cultural and social attitudes and all of that kind of stuff. It's like liberal central, if anything. It's severely, severely liberal. But that is the present situation with Israel. Now, the thing that it plays on, that this narrative plays on with the American people, though, is quite different, and it's really contradictory. I've done reports on this before, but I will say it again, that in my growing up in the United States, the reasoning offered, whether directly or indirectly, behind the very 100% unconditional American support for the Jewish state is that the Jewish people are, one, the chosen people of God. So by the thought processes of many Protestants who believe that they can trigger the second coming through the restoration of the Jewish state and the rebuilding of the Third Temple, and so on and so on. This is a Protestant thing that's been going on for a long time, that the Zionist community in Israel now, or that helped form the new state in 1948, has been most happy to take advantage of, or even create. I don't know. But the idea that Israel is the chosen people of God, and therefore they have a divine right to the strip of territory that belong to historic Israel, and that piece of land belongs to the Jewish people, and it is their holy land, and they should have it, and nobody else should. That's kind of the status of this. Plus the idea that if the Third Temple is built, this will trigger the final events of human history, of created history, where the Antichrist comes, and Armageddon happens, and the second coming of Christ happens, and the resurrection at the end of all time happens, and we all go to heaven and live with God, and that's that. Hallelujah, right? That's kind of how I was taught about it. And so when I was young, my support for Israel was unconditional, because they were the people of God. The second reason that amplifies the first reason was the Holocaust in Germany during World War II. Without the history of what happened in the Holocaust being completely related to the American population, the history that we were popularly taught in the 1970s and probably earlier is that the Allies freed the Jews that were in the concentration camps from their Nazi oppressors, which is true, and that there were millions and millions of Jewish people that were put to death in the Nazi concentration camps, which is also true. This was the final solution. Anti-Jewish people, I don't want to call it anti-Semitism, all right? I don't want to use that, because Semites are not necessarily Jews, okay? Semites are people that are from a particular region of the world, and they can be Jewish faithful, but they are not by definition religious, God-fearing Jewish people. They are so I think anti-Semitism is the wrong way of looking at it. In history, what has been considered anti-Semitism was a direct set of attitudes against Jewish believers because of their belief, because of the way that they worship God differently than Christians do. And it was especially held up as something in comparison to Christians. And amplified, for example, by the Roman Catholic long-held assertion in the Roman Catholic Church that the Jews were responsible for the murder of Christ, something which has been ameliorated in more recent times. The Roman Church was wrong in this idea, because the Jews did not murder Christ. There were plenty of Jewish faithful believers that believed in Christ. The Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, managed to have Jesus put to death from their point of view to eliminate a threat to their own security and power as the leading religious elites of the land, and not without a bit of secular power too, I'm sure. The Roman Catholic idea that the Jews murdered Christ is incorrect, because the Jewish people as a whole did not conspire to murder Jesus Christ. This was done by a small group of elites, theologically elitist people called the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were extremely jealous of Christ because he seemed to be taking their believers and their adherents away from themselves by his preaching and his miracles. And he was also, further compounded against this because he was not particularly against the Roman occupiers. He helped out Romans as well. He was a friend to everybody because he's God. Well, the Jewish people weren't having it, and so, at least the leaders, and so, yes, they did have him arrested, they did have him put to death, but to say that that is the fault of the entire group of adherents of the Jewish religion is grossly untrue. Now, that's in those times, because a lot of Jewish people became followers of Christ during his lifetime and afterwards. So, and they still do. So I think anti-Semitism is incorrect, because Semites can be also Palestinians. They can be some people we technically call Arabs. They are people that live that are originally from a particular area in the world, and it is not a religious identity. It is more of a ethnic identity based on the gene pool, if you will, how genetics work in that way, and so on and so forth. So I am neither an anti-Semite, nor am I an anti-Jewish person by any means. However, when I talk about Judaism, I talk about the faith of Judaism. I'm not talking about the people who profess to be Jews in an ethnic sense. The ethnic Jew is a very different person, a very different animal. They may or may not be religious, and when they are not religious, they are often extraordinarily atheist. We get reports sometimes from a supposed scholar. I'll find his name and post it in the video text over my voice so you can see for yourself. This supposed leading scholar at the Hebrew University, and this man is a professor, and he is a married homosexual person. He is living a lifestyle that is dead against God's commandment about how to live. And yet he calls himself Jewish. And there are a lot of Jewish people that are doing that. Richard Levine, who goes by the name Rachel and dresses as a woman and is a 4-star admiral who Biden put in the Health and Human Services. Victoria Nuland, Ukrainian Jew, atheist, I imagine. Not somebody you would probably see in a synagogue unless it was for appearance, my guess, but probably true. And a lot of others, a whole lot of others. I have never been one to go after the idea of the Jews are taking over the world and all this kind of stuff. I think it's conspiracy theory nonsense. However, there is something to be said about the fact that a lot of the people that are causing a lot of trouble in the world these days happen to be ethnic Jews who are atheist. And in that atheism, they are not promoting Judaism, they are promoting a godless way of life that is homosexual, it's perverted, it's using LGBT stuff, it's using the sexual dysphoria, the transgender thing, and so on. And a lot of those people happen to be Democrats. This is why. I mean, think about the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has become the party of basically anybody who is anti-Christian in their posture, in terms of the way they view the world. Whether they call themselves a Christian believer or not, any semblance of Christianity is buried in the idea that the secular world comes first, and that Christianity is just a religion and needs to be done only in church, but you don't actually go and live your life that way. That's at best. And we have a recent piece coming that's out now that's talking about how the Biden administration has been doing things that are directly and expressly anti-Christian in their nature. For example, the attempt to shut down Grand Canyon University, ostensibly for teaching courses, making students pay money for courses if they don't need. Those courses are probably Christian formation in nature, because the university is Christian. And so if it's Christian, it's got to go. And that's the status of that's the state of affairs in the Biden administration. So I've talked a lot about this idea. I am not anti-Semite. I am not anti-Jewish. I am a Christian. And as a Christian, I try to be a Christian. And as a Christian, I can't really say that I'm against people in the sense that I would want to kill them or do anything, to them. a Christian's standpoint against a person who is doing evil would probably be limited to stopping them from doing it to me or to my family. But it would not be something where we would go and try to forcibly convert that person or brainwash them, but we would want to keep ourselves free of any trouble that they might cause, and that's probably about the limit of it. Otherwise, they're free to do as they want. I wasn't a Christian, in the real sense for a very, very long time, and eventually I became one. And a lot of other people have a similar experience, some atheists, I was never atheist, but some atheists find themselves right smack dab before God, and they realize that He's real, and they become the best believers because they spent a lot of time and effort trying to be intellectually honest enough to be atheist, and being atheist is very difficult. The kind of atheism that we see, I think, with people like Levine and Newland and Biden, even though he says, I'm a devout Catholic. No, he's not. Basically atheist. He's atheist in the way he lives. He is anti-Christian in the way he lives by doing this Transgender Day of Visibility proclamation, such that it fell on Easter Sunday, Pascha in the West, and so on. He is anti-Christian. And so this is worse than atheism. It is deliberately an attack on Christian people. So, what does this all have to do with anything? Well, you see that I've discussed a lot of things in detail. And it's not really a binary sense of reasoning. It's not either this or that. There's a lot of information in between. And so the American press, in particular Fox, has a problem, because a whole lot of us who are conservative politically and who are Christians politically are also becoming increasingly aware, especially those of us who are Orthodox Christians. We are becoming increasingly aware that Israel is not really interested in being the people of God. And to that extent, they are on record for being quite abusive in Israel itself towards Orthodox Christians, towards Roman Catholics. They make nice with the Protestants because the Protestants make nice with them. But the Protestants actually, many of these groups promote Zionism, and that is useful to the Israeli people, where Orthodoxy, for example, does not promote Zionism. It sees Zionism as a problem, certainly that people are free to follow, but that it's not about God at all. It's about sort of an ultra-nationalism kind of thing, and not about the kingdom of God in any respect. The Roman Catholics, I don't really know. They seem to me nowadays to be so wishy-washy in terms of their theology, because they're still trying to get everybody to like them. That's a 2-bit assessment, and it's probably worth less than 2 bits, but that's kind of the shortest short form of how I see that going on. And of course, different people within the Roman Catholic Church will have different opinions. Some like mine, some very much against mine. But I'm talking about the perceived position that I see the church taking about this whole situation. So we have this sort of thing where, Fox is saying Israel is unconditionally right, but there are more and more of us that are also understanding, why did Israel attack the Iranian embassy? How right was that? Well, it's to destroy Iranian terrorists, but the Iranians haven't done anything to Israel. They have proxies, perhaps, Hezbollah and all that kind of stuff, but the Iranian government has not, up to this recent point, they have not launched a direct attack on Israel in a long, long time. They certainly don't like each other, but there is no open belligerence up until last weekend. Or a little bit before that, really, because Israel did it first. But Iran didn't do anything until after Israel hit that embassy. So so there's a hole in the argument. And a binary sense of reasoning, well, you're either with Israel or you're against, or you're with Hamas, is absolutely not true. That's the second thing. I know a lot of Palestinians. I was baptized in a Palestinian church, and it was Orthodox. They are Palestinian Christians. Some of them can't stand Israel, and of course there are historical reasons. Some of them were thrown out of their own houses and off their lands by force by Israeli settlers and at the will of the Israeli government, supported by the United States. It is interesting that the Palestinians came to the United States to make better lives for themselves, and they have. They're very good businessmen, very good, wonderful people in general, very kind. But some of them have more resentment towards Israel, and some of them have less resentment towards Israel. But they all aren't, for the most part, they don't seem to be big fans. But not all of them are part of Hamas either. Some people view Hamas as freedom fighters among them. Some of them don't. And this binary sense of reasoning, where it is seen as you're either with Israel or you're with Hamas, is absolutely untrue, because most Palestinian people are not part of Hamas. And I can't even say that most Palestinian people support Hamas. You know, it's not to be said. And yet 35,000 people or 34,000 Palestinian people, a lot of whom are not Hamas people, are now dead because Israel has taken a free hand to be able to do whatever it wants, and for many of us that is considered a genocide. And what's really horrifying to me is that the line taken by some of Fox's people, maybe all of them, is that this genocide is actually a good thing. And this is horrific. What Christian would want to eradicate a people? You know, why would we want to do that? So this is a very, very deep contradiction, and it puts me in an interesting position about my viewpoint about what what imposter Biden is doing. I almost made a mistake, because I have tried not to call him president, because I don't believe he was legitimate. I don't believe he is legitimate. But he is the guy in the White House right now. And so Biden's stance on Israeli support is very interesting because of Biden's own hatred of anything that would appeal to obedience to God. He knows, just as well as anybody else knows in the United States, what it means to the average American to support Israel. He knows, just as well as I have said, that the general consensus has always been for many years that Israel is the chosen people of God, and that the United States, by supporting the chosen people of God, somehow puts itself in good graces with God. This is Zionism. This is the essential view. And Biden can't take that point of view because he, on one side, oddly enough, to support modern-day Israel is to support all of these God haters that call themselves Jews, that are living the LGBT dream, and are flouting God and not being faithful believers at all. And then he's got Christians who he opposes because of his support for LGBT lifestyle and abortion and drug use and all this other stuff. And most Christians still have not lost their minds about these kind of things. So, and he's got to be on good terms with the Palestinian community for a couple of reasons. Because one is because the U.S. has always helped out the Palestinians, maybe not enough and not sufficiently, but historically the United States has tried to keep relations going with the Palestinian people all the time, whether for illusion or for real effect, in the hopes of creating maybe a two-state situation, a sovereign Jewish state and a sovereign Palestinian state, such as was the original plan for the partition of the Palestinian territories in 1948. So Biden has a problem. His own convictions won't allow him to make a clear stand, and he can't win. he can't win no matter what he does. Because if he goes all in for Israel, then he loses his supporters who are Palestinian, as we have seen. And if he goes all in for Palestine, then the Jews get mad at him because they and their connections to power structures in the United States, not about religion, but their power structure in the U.S. and abroad is potentially exposed, and they are threatened. And so he's doing this. This is probably a good thing, believe it or not. It's probably a good thing. And while the Fox conservative view is very critical of Biden for taking this, and they want him to be all in for Israel, if he does this, then what that invites Israel to do is to carry out what it thinks it's going to do is right and go all in on Iran. And Iran has promised to strike back really, really hard. We have to see in the next few days if Iran indeed responds to this latest limited attack. I think they will, and I think they will respond in a less limited way. That's my prediction. We'll see if I'm right or not. But they just want to fight each other, and so they're going to. And Israel is being held back by the United States, but they would rather. It seems that the government of Israel would rather go all in on it and hold the United States through a nose ring and drag it into battle, so that we get a really major war going on in the Middle East. Something that would break the Abraham Accords and cause more and more fighting as the situation heats up. Because President Trump made a lot of progress with the Abraham Accords, and Saudi Arabia is sitting here waiting to enter into better trade agreements with Israel, but they can't because this whole situation with Iran is going on. Things like this. It's a disaster. And what we have going on in the United States is made even worse because we have all of this idea of having to send military aid to this country and support it. Why? Because Israel is always right. All this kind of stuff, this whole Zionist nonsense. And it is exactly that. It is a nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. The Israeli power, if you will, I'm not talking about the people, but I'm talking about its government. And the people are partly responsible for that because they choose this government. Just the same as the United States is responsible for the disaster that it's bringing on itself because it chose its present government. We all pay the price. We make our own tracks in life, as my grandfather used to say. I'm trying to think and put this live in front of all of you, or on this recording in front of all of you. What do you do? I think the first part of the solution is to do what I've tried to present here, to lay out the idea that this is not a binary situation. If you do binary reasoning, then you're leaving out big chunks of truth. There is a bigger chunk of truth that nobody seems to want to talk about. And that is that in Israel's case, they are absolutely committed to removing the Palestinian people from where they are. Any kind of agreement made with the Palestinians is made in such a way that the Israelis take the advantage. In other words, you get some, I get some, and I get more. You get some and I get some, and I will eventually get it all. So you get nothing. But we'll make an agreement that you will have some in the beginning, and you will agree that I will take more. This is a terrible agreement. It's Indian giving, and I have to say, with some shame, that the American and English history, heritage of our country, is largely put to good use here, because the same thing that the settlers in Washington, D.C. did to the Native Americans is, I'll give you this and then I'll take it back, and you'll be worse off than ever. This same strategy is being applied to the Palestinian people. And so the Palestinians are understandably pretty upset about it. And given that neither side, the Israeli side nor the Palestinian side in majority, has a Christian mindset. The Israelis are Jewish people, and even as modern atheist Jews, they still retain some of that might is right thing. They still retain some of the ethnic, this land is our land thing, and we can take it by force because we are strong enough to do it. And so they think that this is enough. And the Palestinians are Muslim, and the Muslims' point of view about things like this is very similar to the Jews, an eye for an eye. Well, so you've got two eye for an eye states, and they both are saying, if you do this, I will do this. And then the other side does this, so I will do this. I have to retaliate because you did something. And then the other side says, well, because you did something, I have to retaliate. And there is no sense of anything like, hey, why don't we talk about this and come to a peaceful solution? Doesn't matter. They're not going to. They don't want to. For them, I don't like to use the word hate like it's being used in popular reference, as though hate is some kind of abstract force. The way that it's being talked about. Oh, you're a hater. This kind of thing. I'm using a little older English reference. I'm talking about Star Trek. Let that be your last battlefield. This episode, where one side who is white on the right side of his face is adamantly determined to destroy the guy who is white on the left side of his face. They're white and black, right? But because it's the different side of your face that is different, that means you must be destroyed and I will destroy you. And both sides feel the same way, and they're irreconcilable in this hatred. It's all they have left. And I think that's what we see with Israel and Palestine. I think that is what we see with Israel and Iran. This is the ultimate binary. And as you can see, all it does is destroy. All it can do is destroy. And any time our own rhetoric tries to justify one of these sides, whether it be Hamas, whether it, who maybe originally is trying to be a force to fight for Palestinian independence of Israel because Israel is being tyrannical. Again, does that mean I support Hamas? No, I don't support him because I don't support terrorism. I think it is an awful thing to kill innocent people when your beef is not with those particular innocent people. If you want to fight a government, go to war. Go to war. Do it that way. Get your armies out and fight each other and fight it out like men instead of fighting it out like cowards. I have no sympathy for terrorism. And as Hamas is a terrorist group, I have no sympathy for Hamas. But I absolutely have sympathy for the Palestinian people, and I support them. I support that they should have their own place to live, that they should not be molested by outside powers. They should not have their lands being slowly taken away by settlers. They should not be the victims of Indian giving. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm supportive of the Palestinians in that regard. I am also, I also understand and accept the existence of the Jewish state, and it is there, and I don't support what a lot of its leadership seems to be about now in terms of their cultural ideals, their anti-Christian ideals, their anti-Jewish ideals by espousing all manner of hedonism. I don't support that stuff, but they have the right to do it. And according to the original UN Charter, the parts of the land that were identified to be as the Jewish state, okay, I don't agree with the fact that it did happen, but it did happen. I don't think it should have happened, is what I mean, but it did, and it is. And so, to that extent, I don't think that the Israelis should be pushed into the sea. But I do think they need to repent. And they're not going to, unless some miracle happens. They're not going to repent because hatred is self-perpetuating. And the kind of hatred that they describe and display is the hatred that is always amplified by any kind of action that the other side takes. The actions just prove the reason for the hatred. It's like a self-fulfilling thing. That's what makes it so hard to be a Christian. Because Christianity says, lay it down. And it says, to me, Aaron, Seraphim, I must lay it down first. Even when the other side is completely, completely wrong. I must lay down my hatred first. But that means I might get killed. Yeah, it does. And it might be so. And this is a choice that the Christian makes. Now, they might get some people saying, well, why do Christians fight wars? Well, the best explanation I can say, there are a lot of Westerners that talk about just war theory. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I don't believe in just war theory. This is just nonsense. It's self-justification. But I would say this, it might be okay for them to kill me, but it's probably not okay for me to say, go ahead and kill my family too. And so go ahead and kill my nation too. And so for the extent, this is just my personal view. Not scholarly, just I'm trying to make sense out of it as a Christian would, hopefully. It's no good for me to impose suffering on other people because of my willingness to be a martyr, for the faith, for myself. Personally, I'm not really willing to be a martyr in the sense I don't want to die. I don't want to be put to death for my faith. If it comes to that, I guess I have to do that, but it's not my goal. It's not my dream. I hope that I would not betray Christ in such a situation. And honestly, I hope I never get tested on that. So, lest I fail. However, I don't think that it's right to kill my countrymen, to kill my family, to kill the people that I care about. And so if somebody tried to attack my home on that premise, then I would defend it. And I would defend it to the death of every last single person who was attacking or to their surrender. I don't want to do it, but I would have to do it. And I know that a lot of people will take exactly what I say and use that as justification for what they do, and yet still have a very different heart about it, and that includes me too. It's not easy. But if you think about history, there is something to that fact. I mean, when Germany went into Nazism and invaded Poland, and then invaded Russia and was trying to take over England and the rest of Europe, those people were being imposed upon by a hostile power, and they had every right to fight back against the hostile power. It's just how it is. It's a fallen world. How do you meet it as a Christian? You do it the best you can, but you don't go provoking stuff. But there are many Christian saints who were defenders of their country, and they fought as soldiers and killed many, many people. And they're noted for vanquishing the enemy, because that's what they're supposed to do. So they're heroes of the empire, and they were heroes to the Christian believer, because when it came down to it, their work on the battlefield was a prelude or an example of the work that they did defending their faith against the heathen unbelievers in spiritual combat, often manifested in extremely cruel physical ways. So the thing that I want to leave everybody with, hopefully, if I'm doing anything at all, as Tony Stark would say, if I'm saying anything at all, is think. Think. Think about what is real. Think about what is real about, for example, Israel, Palestine, and Hamas, and Iran. What is real about all of this conflict? Is there really a reason to support one side or the other in this conflict? Or are we just bankrolling people who are irreconcilably full of hatred and the will to destroy the other side for almost no further reason other than that other side exists? That's how it seems to me with regards to Israel and Iran. That's how it seems to me with regards to Israel and Palestine. We see their hostility reflected towards Christians. It's a little more polite. Maybe they don't go killing them as much, but I am told by many Orthodox Christians who go to the Holy Land that the Israeli people are not, the government is not very kind to us. They don't like us. And even though our holiest sites are in Jerusalem, like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and Manger Square and Bethlehem and all this kind of stuff, they would probably very much rather we weren't there. And sometimes that comes out. So we need to think critically. And we need to be careful about how we interpret a news report about one side or the other, because if we think that it's true that one side is absolutely right, we're wrong, especially in this situation, because this has been going on for so long that the only way to really solve it is for one side to finally try taking the road of humility and to see if the other side does it, then you have peace. The other side probably won't do it. Or maybe they will. Diplomats are sometimes pretty good at getting people to lay down this animosity. But we haven't seen it lately, and we're not likely to. And I think we all need to consider this kind of thing before we really go casting blame or aspersion around against anybody. And so for that reason, in the Israeli-Iranian conflict, I have no side. I am not on anybody's side because, in my view, I'll say it like they said it in Lord of the Rings with the Ents, we are not on anybody's side because nobody is on our side. The Jewish state is not defending Christianity. The Palestinians are not defending Christianity. The Iranians are not defending Christianity. So what have I to say about it? They're doing what they're going to do. Let them, basically, let them at it. Save our dollars. Same thing with Ukraine. What have I to do with Ukraine? Nothing. I live in Russia. And the reason I support the Russian position in the war is because Ukraine is trying to threaten Russia, but as a Western proxy. And so I support Russia stopping it. And if stopping it means that you have to push back into Ukraine and take more territory and eliminate the power that is creating the problems, then so be it. The outcome of that is a little more sensible, I think. I don't hate the Ukrainians. I don't even hate Zelensky. But they should not be, the idea that this is a proxy intended to break up the Russian Federation, I don't agree with it, so I support Russia. Anyway, that's about all I have. Probably said everything 3 times as much in repetition. But for what it's worth, I hope that this is something useful for you guys watching and listening to try to get you thinking, to think a little more critically. If you're an American particularly, I would probably be very gratified if those of you listening took this and used it in some way or another to help form your actions about what the American government does, in terms of supporting Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan. Do we really have a part in this? Is this really something that is truly important? Not what the news says. Do your research. I think you'll find, and if you look at some of my reports, you'll find out that there's a very different story going on than what the American media tries to press. And so you might have a better response with better information, to the extent that I'm able to provide it. I try to, and I do. But I can give you, look at the Duran. This report will appear on the Duran. I write and do videos for them. But the 2 chief editors of the Duran, Alexander Mercouris and Alexander Christoforou, are absolutely geniuses in the world of geopolitics. And you would do yourself no harm by listening to their broadcasts. Listen to the Duran. Listen to Alexander Mercouris and Alexander Christoforou. Listen to Larry Johnson. Listen to Aisling Byrne and Alistair Crook. Alistair Crook is a former diplomat to the Middle East from Great Britain, and he knows all kinds of stuff about the Palestinians and about the Israeli people, and he's just a giant source of information. So check him out. He does video broadcasts every so often. And there are many others. There is, let me see, of course, Tucker Carlson, Pepe Escobar. A lot of these folks, some of them I know personally. I've met them personally. So there are a lot of sources like that. Listen to Orthodox Christian sources, Father Alexei Tkachev, Father Artemy Vladimirov occasionally talks about things like this. All kinds of sources to get good information, things to think about, to try to put it into a perspective that might actually bring about positive results. Okay, so those are some references I have. I wish you all a great day, and I'm going to conclude this program here. So have a great day. God be with you, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.